My dad is the star of the motion picture. His name is Béla Lugosi, and he plays the part of Dracula in that movie. In 1948, when I was 10 years old, and I got to go on the set for a number of days while they were filming it, and I saw all the monster characters, and stayed there all day. Yeah, it was quite an experience.
Hi, my name's Ron Chaney. I'm the great-grandson of Lon Chaney, the man of a thousand faces, and my grandfather is Lon Chaney Jr., best known as the Wolfman, and maybe preserved and perpetuate that great legacy, and we're very proud of my forefathers from death.
Thank you. How's everybody? We got a great panel for you. We're going to bring out 4 gentlemen who can talk about the movie, and then we'll show the movie. Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. By the way, everybody, my name's Scott, and I'm a movie-holic. And I hope you are all too. First guest is the son of Dracula, the actual son of Dracula, who appears in this film, Béla Lugosi. Please welcome Béla Lugosi Jr. Excellent. Our second guest is the grandson of the Wolfman in this movie. The Wolfman is Lon Chaney Jr., and please welcome his grandson, Ron Chaney. And you can't have a monster panel without 2 monster experts. So we have not 1 but 2. The first monster expert is an Oscar winner for his makeup on Lemony Snicket with Jim Carrey, and he has 3 Emmy Awards. Please welcome Mr. Bill Corso. And lastly, he's another makeup and monster expert with Emmys and all kinds of wonderful films such as E.T. and Poltergeist and The Gate and many, many others, Mr. Craig Reardon. Gentlemen, this movie is considered not only a classic, but in many circles it's considered one of the best Universal monster movies and one of the best Abbott and Costello movies. First, for Béla Jr., you were on the set of this movie when you were 10 years old. What do you recollect about being there?
At the time, I was enrolled in a military school, so I had a military uniform that I would have to wear. But I was invited to the set on a number of days during the filming of Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. So I have a very good, lasting memory.
And Mr. Chaney, this film was your grandfather's, not first, not second, not third, not fourth, 5th appearance as a Wolfman in a Universal movie. How important is that character to not only your grandfather's legacy, but your entire Chaney entertainment legacy?
Well, the Wolfman was, he played a lot of different characters, but he was the only person to play the Wolfman during that time. He referred to it as his baby, and it was his favorite role of all the films he was in, no doubt.
And he did it, again, 5 times. Only one who ever played the Wolfman. This is one of the most fun times he gets to have with the character because, of course, Abbott and Costello are playing it for comedy. The Wolfman is playing it straight, and Dracula is playing it very seriously, even more so perhaps than when he first played Dracula. And here's a little bit of trivia. He only ever played Dracula, Béla Lugosi, 2 times, ever in movies. In the original Dracula, and then in this movie. How important was Dracula to your dad's life and career and now his legacy?
Well, I think that that's a role he perfected on the Broadway stage and touring before he ever did the movie. But we really wouldn't be talking about him so much had he never gotten that part. It was really a seminal part for him.
I think if you think about Dracula, there's been many, many Draculas. To me, this is the only Dracula, Béla Lugosi. And there's been, right? there's been many werewolf films over the years, right? We could name them all. Of course, newer films as well. But to me, there's only one wolf man, and that's Lon Chaney Jr., right?
Just to follow up on that question, yeah, the Wolfman meant an awful lot to my grandfather, but not only that, because of his father being known as the Man of a Thousand Faces and doing Phantom of the Opera and Hunchback of Notre Dame and so many other various characters, it was the first time he did another one, Man-Made Monster, before that, but this was the one he actually got to step out really from his father's shadow as in makeup, let's say, because he did, of course, Lenny and My Simon before that, which was really his breakthrough role, but this was the one that really set his own mark in Hollywood for himself, so that's what it meant for him being so special, and of course, me growing up, and, you know, hey, who are you? That name sounds familiar. Well, Chaney, who's that? Lon Chaney? Obviously, as generations go by, they don't always remember the name, but when I say the Wolfman, certainly everybody recollects that classic image. I know myself and my daughters who help me now with the company, we're just really proud of, you know, all they accomplished, and we're looking at makeup artists afterwards to continue a great legacy, and usually look towards our forefathers as really the grandfathers of the showman in particular. So we're very proud of it.
Right? I think just a point of clarification, if you guys don't know, out in the lobby, you'll see many things for Lon Chaney Jr., who played the Wolfman in this movie and many others. But another thing you should know about Ron Chaney sitting there is his great-grandfather was Lon Chaney Sr., who was a famous silent movie actor, worked in sound at the very end of his career, but did do 2 movies at Universal, which I'm sure everybody knows, The Hunchback of Notre Dame and The Phantom of the Opera. And those are both silent, black and white classics, and he was so popular that perhaps in the 1920s, only a very few serious actors were more popular. And of course, some comedians like Charlie Chaplin. But when he says step out of the shadow, absolutely, Lon Chaney Sr. was enormously popular in the silent years, and it did take his son more than 10 years after Lon Chaney Sr.'s death to carve his own niche. And that's a very important point to note. Remember, after the film, you can talk to these wonderful folks in the lobby downstairs. We'll be there for you after the presentation. Before we get to the stories, and we'll get to a couple of stories, Mr. Corso specializes in makeup techniques not too dissimilar from the ones in the movie. Bill, talk about the techniques that were used in this film and how it's changed to what you do now.
Well, this movie's interesting because, you know, in the original Frankenstein and the original Wolfman, I mean, I think probably the Wolfman's probably not that far removed, but the original Frankenstein was created, you know, by applying, you know, many different, you know, highly toxic chemicals to Karloff's face to create that visage. And I think this was one of the first times, well, no, actually, this string of movies, House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula and all, where cast pieces were being used, you know, actually foam, rubber appliances, which made the application much easier for the actors. My very first experience of Frankenstein was Glenn Strange. To me, that's Frankenstein. As much as Boris Karloff, it's like the first time you saw James Bond. You know, it's like Roger Moore was James Bond to me. I didn't know from the Sean Connery guy. So Glenn Strange was Frankenstein to me. So when I saw the original Frankenstein, I'm like, well, that doesn't look like Frankenstein. So that was the visage I had, and that's the visage I would draw, was Glenn Strange as Frankenstein. And you know, and then I would draw, and I made myself up as a 6-year-old, 6-year-old. I made myself up as the Wolfman by cutting up one of my mom's furs, cutting it, because it looked great. It had the exact right brown fur. And so I remember getting, I mean, they didn't have glue, but I remember reading in a magazine that you could just take honey, or like something. I think I put honey on my face and cut up my mom's fur and stuck the honey to my face. Thank God there's no physical or visual evidence of that I ever did that, photographic evidence. But yeah, I mean, and that's probably not far removed from how it was originally done, although it wasn't honey, it was spirit gum. But you know, when you're a kid starting out, the fascinating thing to me was, and I read up on these makeups, I would start doing them on myself, much like they did them in the original movies, you know, like I would take putty, nose putty, and I'd make the noses, and I'd glue the hair in little bits to my face. And that's how they really did it, you know, and it wasn't until later, it come towards this movie, where they actually sculpted and cast rubber pieces that they would glue on, and had a little bit more of a streamlined way to do it, although the transformation, I don't think changed, the process of it changed much. He still had to be pinned down and done, you know, bit by bit by bit over a course of hours, 4 or 5 hours, whatever it is. It's an amazing evolution to watch in these movies, you know, because the overall look is the same. The process of getting there changed quite a bit.
Craig, you can comment on this. The man who did all the Universal monsters up until this film was not used in this film. Tell us who that man was and why is he important and how this movie is different.
Oh, okay. Well, Scott's referring to Jack Pierce. Jack Pierce was the makeup artist who was in charge of the Universal makeup department, I believe, from the 1920s through this film. Just shortly before this film, he was fired. There was a new company made from Universal, an independent company called International, bought it, and it became known as Universal International. I don't know the particulars, but I think the Westmore family knew about this and thought it would be an opportunity to get one of their family in there. They had a guy at every studio. I met a couple of those original brothers. I met Bud and Percy. And Bud got the job. He was 30 years old, and I have to say that I think he was the right man for the next leg of the journey for Universal. Jack was a brilliant man, Jack Pierce, but he was very much set in his ways as to how he did his work. He was very meticulous. Time didn't mean that much to him as long as it came out the way he wanted it done. But it would take, reports vary, but it would take upwards of 4 hours due to the Frankenstein makeup. I would be willing to bet, and Bill would probably agree, that this makeup in this film probably took about an hour and a half. Now that's a big difference. And why is it? Because they're not waiting an additional 2.5 hours to get Glenn Strange on the set and get going, see? So economics played a part. Did the work suffer? It's a matter of interpretation. If you look at the original Frankenstein, it's one of the great characters of all time. Bill made the amusing, personal sidelight when he got to know Glenn Strange before Boris Karloff. Well, that's all rectified now. You've seen them all, and so have we all, I'm sure. There's something very organic, frightening, and strangely credible about seeing Boris Karloff in that Jack Pierce creation. But there's something wonderful about seeing Glenn Strange in this film. It's almost as if they reinterpreted Frankenstein's monster. Now he's got his hair swept back on the sides, kind of like Elvis. He's got a kind of a wonderful, almost like a kind of a 50s tail fin, supercharged look. And, but it's done with great affection. I want to riff a little bit. I think, again, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I think I will be speaking for a lot of you out there and some of us up here, that what makes this movie succeed, and you'll notice this when you see it, and this is a beautiful version you're going to be seeing from the new Blu-ray that's just come out. It's razor sharp. It never looked better than this. Look at how this movie is shot. It isn't flat. It isn't like a kind of a cartoon movie. It's done almost like a dramatic film. The musical score is fantastic. It plays it straight. The actors have charisma to burn. You've got Béla Lugosi, for crying out loud. You've got Lon Chaney Jr. These guys took it seriously. They brought an earnestness and a complete seriousness to what they did. And you have to have that if you're going to play these other guys off it. The monsters can't be winking at you. They can't be like, yeah, I'm a wolf man. When you see Chaney, he's fantastic. And Béla Lugosi, my God, how he holds the screen. What a man, And Bill, I know, would agree with me on this one. A makeup artist is an artist of nothing unless he's got an actor. The actor's first, last, and everything. What you contribute is to help him look the part, and that's it. But you can't have a makeup walk on set by itself, you know what I mean? So I mean, when you see these wonderful looking characters, remember that these are great actors, great actors. And the impact of this film on me when I was a kid was all over the place. I just thought it was one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. Well, guess what? I'm 59, and I still think it's one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. I think it's one of the greatest movies I've ever made.
The reason I suggested we do this movie today and brought it together was 1973. WOR-TV in New York City. Anyone here from New York? Not a soul. Oh, come on. WOR. Does anyone remember that? Still exists. 11 o'clock in the morning in 1973, on Sunday, there'd be an Abbott and Costello film every Sunday. And of course, they made something like 50 pictures, so you'd see every film through a year. And when I saw this movie, I thought, the monsters and Abbott and Costello, you're bringing together two things that I love in one movie. You didn't have to watch 10 movies to get all this stuff. A Dracula film, a Frankenstein film, and a Wolfman film. So, we're going to see Frankenstein, we're going to see the Wolfman, we're going to see Dracula and Abbott and Costello. Who wants anything else?
We're not going to see the Invisible Man.
We're not going to see the Invisible Man. Two things I want you to do, actually, three things. I want you to try to see if you can find when the Invisible Man's in this movie. It's kind of a loaded question. Second thing, watch very closely at the beginning when Frankenstein first sees Costello. Watch very closely. If you look closely, Frankenstein's monster is scared of Costello, which if you watch very carefully is actually very funny. Just for a second he's scared, and then Béla Lugosi says, no, he can't hurt you. So watch for that. And one other line, it's one of the best lines in the film. They're going to take Costello's brain, right? And he says, don't take my brain. He says, I've had this brain for 32 years, but it hasn't worked right once. Watch for that. Those are some of the best moments in the film. The man sitting to my left, to your right, was actually on the set of this movie. We're going to get started soon. I know we're going long here. Tell us quickly, what was it like being on the set of this movie? And what was it like meeting these folks? Your dad, and Glenn Strange, and Lon Chaney Jr.?
Well, I have a number of memories. One, a pretty vivid one, is that when there'd be a break, people would stand there where you could get drinks, coffee, and tea, and things like that. But I remember having Lon's grandfather in costume and Glenn Strange in costume go with me to this drink stand to get something to drink. And I got my picture taken with it. It was pretty amazing.
I wonder if my daughters are young, and they've come with me on a couple of sets. And I wonder if any of those, I doubt any of those movies will have the impact that this has had. But it's like, the kids see things from such a different perspective, and it's like your dad has this job, and he just does this thing, and you're used to it, It's not like, we look back and, oh my God, it was amazing. It's like, do you realize when you're a child, I look at my daughter, do you understand how cool this is? She's like, yeah,
One of the things that stood out in that is that my dad was so prepared, always, that, one take is about all you need. And there'd be I'd watch 13 takes of the same scene, but there was always someone else who flubbed the line and did something. And so, his state of preparedness was amazing. And I've always remembered that. And another interesting thing, the set was dark and depressing. And so they actually hired a comedian to go around and two fellows, I remember, and they'd go around and cut up and try to joke with my dad and Chaney and Glenn Strange, just to lighten the atmosphere.
It was so goth. Mr.
You should do
Chaney.
that more often. Hire people to joke around on set.
There was one little story in Béla just kind of set something out there where a character taken to the stand, but apparently during the filming when they were all dressed up in costume, Wolfman, Dracula, and Frankenstein, they went over to the Universal Commissary to get lunch, and apparently they walked in, everybody was in shock, and they're just looking at all the monsters there, and they had a lot of the food returned, because like some of the waitresses dropped, you know, the trays, and the people were just like ready to eat, drop their food, so they had a lot of food going back, and apparently one of the producers, or one of the higher-ups, said they couldn't go there anymore, too much food was being returned, and obviously it was shortly after World War II had ended, so, you know, that was, you have to remember the times as well, but I thought that was pretty funny. They were kind of relegated to their dressing rooms to eat from there on in.
Very funny. And you knew your grandfather. Tell us a little about what you remember about Lon Chaney Jr.
Well, I do get that question a lot, and you know, everybody wants me to come up with all of these movie stories, and you know, I just don't have so many movie stories. I wasn't on the set with him, but who he was to me was Gramps. That's what we always called him. He was just Gramps. And he played with us all growing up. I was 17 when he passed away, but I have all different memories from my childhood, and we lived with him for a little while when I was very young, but taught us how to play cards. We would bet on boxing matches when we watched boxing. You get, you know, this was all black and white TV at that time, so you got the white trunks or dark trunks, and he was very animated. So, you know, this guy was winning, he was winning, he was, oh, he's all over, he's doing this, and then when our guy was winning, he'd start crying, and he'd give us all these faces, but he was a wonderful storyteller. I mean, he could just capture you, and you listen because he was so animated. And, you know, a little bit of our family background. There was deafness on Lon Chaney's, my great-grandfather. Both of his parents were deaf-mute, so his first language was one of sign language. And then my grandfather lived with his grandparents who also knew sign language. So if you ever know any deaf people and watch them communicate, so much of the expression, and certainly handed down to Lon Chaney and to my grandfather as well, passed on through, that pantomime art is truly an art, and Charlie Chaplin had it, and that was why Senior was one of the last of the whole house. But Gramps was just a very warm, kind-hearted person, very jovial, and loved to tell stories, and it was just always a lot of fun to be around, just as my grandfather, you know, unless he got mad, and then you had to watch out for the wolf. Okay.
After the movie, I do want everyone to come back to the lobby and say hello. If you look closely, you'll definitely see Béla Lugosi and Mr. Béla Lugosi Jr. You can see the resemblance, and I think there's a resemblance.
Is that a good thing, or is that a good thing or bad thing?
It's a good thing. I see a resemblance to Ron and his great-grandfather, Lon Chaney Sr. There's definitely something there in the shape of the face and whatnot. I want our guys to comment on one last thing, and then we'll get the movie rolling. You guys are all here because you love this movie and you remember these characters. That's not true with everybody, right? A lot of stuff is forgotten that's older, even sometimes to a shocking degree. These characters, if you put it in context, in the 40s, were enormously popular. Those characters at this time were kind of like your horror icons of today, which are probably things like Michael Myers and Jason and Freddy Krueger and things like that. So if you put it in that context, they were enormously popular. You'd walk up on the street to somebody and say, hey, Frankenstein, and they know what you mean. And that's not as true today for the older stuff as you might think, this crowd being the exception. I'd like you to comment on that. Well, in your art, is this true? The people you work with on your sets and in your films today know these characters as well as all the people here and whatnot might?
You know, from my experience, I'm sure Craig could appreciate this or agree, but the people that we work with in film are, especially our group, all grew up idolizing these movies. I mean, and most people that work in film, it's like people that get into sports, live for sports. Most people that we work with in film live for film. And if you're at all involved in genre movies like we are, and doing the kind of work artistically back that we are, you know, inevitably you'll come across a conversation where this was a big part of your childhood. You know, I mean, you can, you know, any great genre filmmaker from Steven Spielberg to George Lucas to all, you know, we all can trace, you know, every one of those can trace some of their childhood roots back to the famous Monsters magazine. And that was just, and this was a big part of that, you know. I mean, you know, you're talking about, you know, my grandfather is, you know, this, and my father is this, and they were fathers and grandfathers for all of us, you know, because I grew up just wanting to be part of that world and in that. I mean, that was my whole life. Was, you know, I remember this being the first movie. I mean, I'm a makeup artist because of a movie called Young Frankenstein. Like, that was the pivotal movie for me that made me become a makeup artist. But I wouldn't have gotten into Young Frankenstein at like 8 had I not been obsessed with monsters, because I saw this at 5. And that's all I wanted to be involved with. So, you can easily say Freddy versus Jason would have been a better movie if Abbott and Costello maybe helped him out. They could have used a little help.
Abbott and Costello beat Freddy and Jason.
That'd be good, right?
Greg, you were of the generation that saw these films on television, I'm guessing in the early to mid 60s, when they first started to be shown on television. For your generation of people, and Bill and I are probably from a little bit later, how much of an impact do these characters have to your generation, and is it still being felt amongst your peers?
Yeah, I would segue from Bill's comments. The difference was that when I was a child growing up, television was whatever it wanted to be, not what you wanted. You didn't have video options. You had to wait and see what they programmed. So you'd wait till until you thought your teeth would fall out for Dracula or the Wolfman to be programmed, or you didn't see it. So when you did see it, and it was in the television, TV guide, it was like, wow! I've got clear the decks. I've got to be there in front of this television, whatever it was, 12 o'clock Saturday, because the Wolfman or Dracula or whatever, Universal had evidently grouped them together and sold them for syndication to television. So they showed up in very lumpen fashion. You never knew which one you would see. It might not even be one of the ones with these characters. It might be something, that they had made to scare people in the 40s that hasn't stood the test of time. So that was how you saw them. You saw them piecemeal, and you really had to be patient, and more patient. I think it's wonderful that we have the option now to rent or to buy a video, and thank God for it. But yeah, I was absolutely crazy about these things. Just like Bill, he's absolutely right. We know all kinds of people who all feel the same deep, deep affection, love for these characters, and for the movies. Ron and Béla can tell us about what it was like to have their dad, their granddad as human beings. And those are beautiful memories. The amazing thing to me about an artist is that he steps outside himself as the person he was and becomes this strange thing that you can't quite get in your hand, but it lives every time you see the movie. You know what I mean? It becomes a work of art, except that an actor uses himself. So you're seeing Béla Lugosi as Dracula. You're not seeing the real Béla Lugosi, the real Chaney Jr., but there are aspects of it. It's an amazing thing, really. Makeup, of course, plays its kind of confusion. I want to say really quickly, I got to meet Chaney Jr. It was called the Count Dracula Society, believe it or not. And they gave him an award, and he was very gracious. I got his autograph. He had beautiful penmanship. And I'd drawn a picture of a Wolfman. I still have that one. And a very nice man. And unfortunately, I never got to meet Béla Lugosi. I would love to have done so. I was very young when he died. But my grandmother met Chaney Sr. And she said he was a very nice man. Yeah, she worked as a secretary at Universal in 1923. And he actually recognized her. It was a small enough outfit back then. He recognized her and another lady who worked in the secretarial where he would walk through. And he gave him a ride to the studio. And she remembered that he said he would talk about his son with great love and pride. This is from my grandma who met him. Offer that to your family. Because there are sometimes these strange kind of BS stories about how he was terrible to his son and this and that. And I would rather believe what my grandmother said. And I would rather believe what Béla says about his dad, what a gentleman he was and what a professional. And how deeply loved he was within his family.
Well, I think we all agree this is a yes. We all agree this is a great classic film. You guys are going to get to watch it now on Blu-ray, which is available now also.
Can I ask, Who here, is there anybody here who has not seen this movie?
Show of hands.
Have not seen this movie?
You're gonna do it for big.
Some of the balcony crew.
Yeah, I mean, I'm proud to say that, you know, every generation that's seen this movie since it's come out, my 2.5-year-old and I watched this movie a few weeks back 5 times in a row. And she'd be still watching it if I didn't put back in, you know, whatever it was, the Wiggles, I think. But it's nice to know that no matter what age and what generation, this movie captivates. And, you know, I'll be paying for that probably the rest of my life. But it was wonderful. So that's exciting. Good for you. You're going to love it.
The movie just discovered. Did you have something to say?
My grandfather appears obviously as Lawrence Talbot, the Wolfman in here, but there is a short scene he also appears as Frankenstein.
When he's throwing someone out of the window, watch for that scene really fast. When he's throwing a character out, I won't say who, when he's throwing someone out of the window, that's Lon Chaney Jr.'s Frankenstein, just for that one scene, because the actor, Glenn Strange, hurt his foot doing a similar scene and had to be replaced just for that day.
I've got something to add there if you'd like to hear it. I've got a letter that was sent to my grandfather for doing that. If you want me to read it to you guys, it's probably about the only chance I'm going to hear it.
Hip pocket.
That's it. I can put my glasses on.
Thank you guys for your patience. We're minutes away from the movie.
It's pretty short. It's from Universal International Pictures. Dated March 17, 1948. Dear Lon, you're stepping into the breach for Frankenstein yesterday has just came to my attention, and I hasten to compliment you on a very rare and very generous gesture. This is the sort of cooperation which makes us realize there are some people in the business who are interested in it's right on the crease, a great deal. Great deal more than their own function in it. And this was signed by William Dozier.
William Dozier was the head of the entire studio. That's pretty
So
impressive.
he stepped in the breach and he was thanking him for doing that because it kind of saved the picture at the end because Glenn Strange did break his leg. So look for it, you'll spot it in here when it's time. But I wanted to share that with you, especially since you're all here to appreciate the movie with us. Thank you.
One last question for Béla, and then we'll wrap up. What do you think your dad's legacy is to the new generation of people alive today? How do you think he's seen to this newer generation?
You know, he's so imitated, and so whatever it was he created that gets imitated all the time is his legacy that he keeps handing down, and people, I think, aspire to, you know, how many people ever last so long in the public, pop culture? It's really amazing.
Not many. Everyone give a really nice hand for Béla Lugosi Jr. Ron Chaney. Bill Corso. Reardon. My name's Scott. I'll see you guys in the lobby after